If you give someone your power, don't be surprised when they package it, put a price tag on it, and use it to fund their next billion-dollar empire. For years, the internet laughed and made memes about the infamous LoriHarvey effect. We all saw the jokes about how she moves through Hollywood's most elite men like a high-speed train, leaves them completely emotionally wrecked, and walks away with her brand looking 10 times more radiant. But what happens when the game backfires? What happens when one of those men refuses to stay quiet in the shadows and decides to flip the entire script? MichaelBJordan didn't just survive the fallout, he went out and conquered the world. But behind the closed doors of his inner circle, the fury is finally boiling over. Word on the street is that MBJ has allegedly had enough of the calculated narratives. He is reportedly ready to expose the exact blueprint of how LoriHarvey used his global stardom, and later, the rising fame of Damson Idris, as nothing more than high-profile stepping stones to keep her name cementing the headlines. We are talking about real industry frustration, strategic timelines, and a pattern so cold it will make your jaw drop. Was it ever actually real love, or was it the most genius, calculated PR masterclass Hollywood has ever witnessed? Grab your popcorn and lock in. The receipts we have today are absolutely wild, and the truth coming out of his camp is deeply unsettling. Let's get into it. To understand how deep this game truly goes, we have to go back to the exact moment the blueprint was created, because you cannot analyze the destruction without looking at the foundation. Before late 2020, MichaelBJordan was widely known as one of the most fiercely guarded, intensely private men in the entire entertainment industry. This was a man who spent over a decade building a flawless A-list reputation, climbing from minor television roles to becoming a global cinematic powerhouse. Yet the public knew absolutely nothing about who he was holding hands with behind closed doors. He never posted women on his social media grids, he never brought casual dates to high-profile red carpets, and he never allowed the intrusive Hollywood paparazzi to catch a glimpse of his vulnerable side. His brand was built entirely on discipline, intense physical training, a clean image, and an unmatched work ethic that made him the ultimate eligible bachelor. Then, almost overnight, the walls he spent his entire life building did not just crack. They completely crumbled to the ground the exact moment LoriHarvey entered the frame. Suddenly, the private, untouchable, and stoic actor the world thought they knew vanished into thin air, replaced by a man who seemed completely intoxicated by a highly publicized romance. For the first time in his career, he was not just acknowledging a relationship, he was actively flaunting it, allowing the cameras to document every single intimate milestone. We saw them kissing on snowy mountaintops, holding hands under the flashing lights of massive paparazzi swarms, and sharing heavily curated, professional-looking photographs on Instagram that looked more like high-fashion ad campaigns than real, raw moments of human connection. The most shocking moment for fans came when he reportedly rented out an entire public aquarium just for a private Valentine's Day date, filling the glass tunnels with thousands of expensive roses just to show the world how deeply he had fallen. To the casual observer scrolling through social media, it looked like a fairy tale romance where Hollywood's golden boy had finally found his match, but seasoned industry insiders were already raising their eyebrows at the sheer intensity of the public display. Look at the stark contrast between who MichaelBJordan was before this relationship and who he became during it, because that is where the real anomaly lies. He was giving this woman unprecedented, unrestricted access to his global platform, effectively sharing his hard-earned cultural capital with someone who, up until that point, was primarily known in the media for her famous stepfather and her highly publicized string of brief involvements with music moguls and athletes. By alignment, Lori was instantly elevated from a social media influencer into a mainstream, front-page celebrity, sitting front row at the most exclusive events in the world purely on the arm of Hollywood's most sought-after leading man. The relationship ran its course for roughly a year and a half, serving as a non-stop media circus that kept both of their names trending on an almost weekly basis, until the summer of 2022 when the bubble abruptly burst. When the breakup was announced, the narrative that immediately flooded the mainstream gossip outlets was incredibly specific, highly polished, and suspiciously clean. Sources heavily tied to Lori's camp rushed to the press to declare that the split was entirely amicable, claiming that Michael was ready to fully settle down, buy a multi-million-dollar estate, and take the relationship to marriage, while Lori was simply too young, free-spirited, and focused on her rapidly growing business empire to be tied down. It was a narrative designed to make her look like the ultimate independent woman who chooses her personal peace over the pressure of a traditional relationship. But it left Michael looking like the heartbroken lover, left holding the bag. For months after the split, the public watched as Michael visibly struggled to process the emotional fallout under the unforgiving glare of the spotlight, trying his best to put on a brave face while the internet dissected his every move. When he hosted Saturday Night Live shortly after the breakup, his monologue featured self-deprecating jokes about being single and needing to learn a new language because he was already in peak physical shape. A moment that the crowd laughed at but industry insiders recognized as a coping mechanism. Later, during a highly publicized interview on CBS Mornings, the tension in his body language was palpable as he tried to convince the world that he was in his peak year, calling it his personal Jordan year while simultaneously admitting that he had to bury himself entirely in his work just to survive the mental exhaustion. He was working overtime to prove to the public and perhaps to himself that he was completely fine, but the cracked tone in his voice told a completely different story. While Michael was using intense physical labor and long hours on film sets to numb the pain of a very real, very public heartbreak, Lori's brand was experiencing an unprecedented, astronomical surge in mainstream commercial value. She didn't take a single day off to mourn the relationship, nor did she retreat from the public eye. Instead, she capitalized on the massive wave of sympathy and curiosity by booking high-paying modeling gigs, launching her own skincare line, and appearing on the covers of major magazines where she dropped cryptic quotes about refusing to compromise her peace for anyone. She was actively teaching a masterclass on how to exit a high-profile relationship with more cultural leverage than you had when you entered it, leaving the public to wonder if the entire romance was just a beautifully executed stepping stone. The true nature of this pattern became undeniably clear to Michael and his inner circle not when the relationship ended, but when the exact same sequence of events began to repeat itself with a completely different target just 6 months later. It was as if a pre-written Hollywood script had been dusted off, the male lead had been recast, and the production was starting all over again without missing a single beat or altering a single line of dialogue. The new target was Damson Idris, a brilliantly talented, critically acclaimed British actor who was rapidly rising through the ranks of the industry thanks to his phenomenal, elite-level performance as Franklin Saint on the hit television series Snowfall. Damson was respected by his peers and adored by a dedicated fanbase, but he was completely unaccustomed to the toxic, hyper-invasive world of mainstream American paparazzi culture and internet gossip columns. When Lori and Damson went public in early 2023, the media coverage surrounding the young actor shifted instantaneously from his incredible artistic achievements to his personal life, overshadowing his talent with sensational headlines. Suddenly, he wasn't being interviewed about his acting choices, his grueling preparation for complex roles, or his future cinematic projects. Instead, every single media outlet wanted to know what it felt like to be the next man holding the hand of the internet's favorite IT girl. His social media following exploded by hundreds of thousands of users in a matter of weeks. His name began trending on Twitter every single weekend for simply walking out of a restaurant, and fashion brands that had previously ignored him were suddenly desperate to dress him for high-profile events. In a telling interview with Rolling Stone during the height of the media frenzy, Damson openly confessed to feeling overwhelmed by the sudden, suffocating level of public scrutiny, naively stating that he assumed the intense attention would eventually die down once the novelty of the relationship wore off. He genuinely believed that the public would return to focusing on his work, but he failed to realize that when you enter this specific orbit, your work becomes entirely secondary to the narrative of the relationship itself. He was being introduced to a level of superficial fame that felt intoxicating at first, but carried a heavy, invisible price tag that would eventually demand full payment when the spotlight inevitably shifted. The relationship followed the exact same trajectory as the one before it, lasting roughly a year before a sterile, perfectly worded joint statement was released to the press in November of 2023, announcing that they had mutually decided to part ways while maintaining love and respect for one another. Just like that, the companion was dismissed, the public was told that both parties were moving on without any hard feelings, and Lori walked away completely untouched by the scandal, her brand intact, her relevance solidified, and her status as an untouchable cultural icon further cemented in the minds of millions of followers. But behind the scenes of this endless cycle of public romance and sudden dismissal, a massive storm was quietly brewing in the upper echelons of Hollywood. driven by the growing frustration of the men who felt they had been used as seasonal accessories. MichaelBJordan had spent years remaining completely silent, refusing to give the gossip blogs the satisfaction of a reaction, but sources close to the actor indicate that his patience finally reached its absolute limit as the true mechanics of the fame machine became impossible to ignore. He had watched the pattern happen to himself, he had watched it happen to a rising star like Damson, and he was reportedly furious that his genuine vulnerable emotions had been utilized as fuel for a massive multi-year branding strategy designed to keep a single individual relevant at the highest level of popular culture. The turning point that reportedly shattered Michael's silence and triggered a massive shift in his camp strategy came when the initial whispers of a secret reunion between Lori and Damson began circulating through the industry networks, hinting at a calculated return to the spotlight. It became increasingly obvious to everyone paying close attention that these relationships were not happening by random chance or organic romance, but were being carefully timed to coincide with major career milestones, massive movie releases, and high-profile industry events where maximum media coverage was guaranteed. The realization that his past heartbreak was just chapter 1 in a highly sophisticated public relations manual reportedly pushed Michael to drop the nice guy persona completely, allowing those within his closest professional circle to finally start speaking the raw, unvarnished truth about what really happened behind the closed doors of that historic relationship. The industry whispers quickly transformed into a calculated corporate chess match as MichaelBJordan's camp began quietly executing a strategy to reclaim the narrative entirely, marking the true beginning of what insiders are calling the ultimate Hollywood pushback. For a long time, the public had been fed a one-sided story where Lori was the untouchable curator of her own destiny, effortlessly outmaneuvering the most powerful men in entertainment, while leaving no trace of her own vulnerability behind. But as Michael's career surged toward a whole new dimension of critical respect and historic industry power, the power dynamic shifted dramatically, forcing a massive re-evaluation of the receipts left behind in the wake of her rapid rise to fame. According to high-level industry sources operating deep within the Hollywood agency networks, the frustration within Michael's circle wasn't just about a fractured heart or a broken romance. It was about the commercial exploitation of a deeply private man's personal brand. When Michael originally entered that relationship, he didn't just open his heart, he opened his entire professional ecosystem, allowing his pristine public image to act as a massive cultural incubator for someone looking to solidify their mainstream commercial footprint. The sudden realization that his genuine life-altering emotional vulnerability had been systematically mapped out, analyzed, and utilized as a highly effective promotional launchpad was a bitter pill to swallow for an actor who prides himself on absolute authenticity. The depth of this alleged corporate manipulation became even more glaringly obvious when looking at the highly specific financial and promotional timelines that synchronized perfectly with the duration of their romance. During the peak months of her relationship with Michael, Lori's commercial representation secured a massive wave of lucrative beauty partnerships, high fashion campaigns, and mainstream media profiles that would typically take years of independent career building to achieve. The moment Michael's star power was attached to her name, her market value skyrocketed into an entirely different tax bracket, creating a highly profitable business model that seemed to rely heavily on the continuous spotlight generated by her association with a top-tier Hollywood leading man. This exact economic and social pattern is precisely why Michael's camp reportedly reacted with intense frustration when the exact same operational strategy was deployed against Damson Idris just a few short months later. To those who understand the inner workings of celebrity public relations, it looked less like an organic pursuit of love and romance, and more like a highly sophisticated, recurring corporate cycle designed to extract maximum media leverage from rising stars. Damson, who was just beginning to taste the massive life-altering success of his critically acclaimed work on premium television, was thrust into the center of a hyper-invasive media storm that he was simply not equipped to navigate on his own terms. Leaked reports from within the production circles of Damson's major projects suggest that the young actor's management team was deeply concerned about how rapidly the sensational gossip surrounding his personal life was beginning to eclipse his artistic credibility. He was no longer being discussed as one of the most talented, intensely dedicated actors of his generation. Instead, he was being reduced to a flashy internet talking point, a fashionable arm accessory whose primary value to the public was his proximity to a highly publicized social media influencer. The heavy emotional toll of constantly defending the validity of his relationship, while trying to maintain his professional focus, began to create visible cracks in his stoic public persona. The narrative became even more complicated when looking at the bizarre, highly strategic timeline of their eventual split in late 2023, which left fans and industry commentators asking serious questions about the authenticity of the entire arrangement. The public was told that the breakup was completely mutual and filled with endless respect, but the sudden drop in Damson's media visibility immediately following the announcement told a wildly different story. It was as if the massive, non-stop media apparatus that had been built around him overnight was instantly dismantled the moment the relationship ceased to serve its specific promotional purpose, leaving him to rebuild his public identity from scratch. But the true catalyst for MichaelBJordan's alleged fury wasn't just the historical mistreatment of past partners. It was the audacious, highly calculated attempt to reboot the exact same narrative in late 2025 and early 2026, just as major career milestones were approaching. As Damson Idris's upcoming mega-blockbuster film began generating massive worldwide hype, the paparazzi suddenly, and quite conveniently, managed to capture highly intimate, cinematic photographs of Lori and Damson enjoying a high-profile reunion. The flawless timing of this sudden public reconciliation raised massive red flags across the entire industry, signaling to seasoned commentators that the fame machine was being spun back into motion to capitalize on the upcoming film's massive promotional cycle. Michael's camp viewed this sudden development as the ultimate confirmation of their suspicions, recognizing the exact same playbook that had been used to manipulate his own public image years prior. The realization that these high-profile relationships could be turned on and off like a faucet to coincide perfectly with movie releases, fashion weeks, and international press tours was the final straw for the Oscar-winning actor's inner circle. They decided that it was finally time to quietly pull back the curtain and expose the cold, calculating mechanics operating behind the glamorous, heavily filtered facade of Hollywood's most famous serial dater. Anonymous sources close to the elite talent agencies representing these actors have begun whispering about the existence of highly detailed, non-disclosure agreements and strategic relationship frameworks that dictate exactly how these public romances are supposed to be presented to the world. These imaginary frameworks allegedly outline specific media appearances, pre-approved social media posts, and coordinated paparazzi strolls designed to generate maximum internet engagement, while keeping the true nature of the arrangement completely hidden from the public eye. It is a world where real human emotion is treated as a highly valuable commodity, traded for likes, followers, and multi-million-dollar corporate sponsorship deals. The public reaction to these brewing behind-the-scenes tensions has created a massive, highly polarized digital civil war across social media platforms, with millions of fans fiercely debating the ethics of Lori's alleged relationship strategies. One side of the internet fiercely defends her actions, viewing her as a brilliant, fiercely independent modern woman who understands her immense worth and refuses to allow herself to be trapped in relationships that no longer serve her personal brand or emotional peace. They view her ability to effortlessly navigate the highest levels of Hollywood wealth and power as a form of cultural empowerment, a well-deserved victory in a game that has historically been dominated by powerful, manipulative men. However, the opposing camp of internet commentators and celebrity journalists views the situation through a much darker, far more cynical lens, arguing that her pattern of behavior represents the absolute worst aspects of modern clout culture. They point out the devastating emotional wake left behind by her sudden departures, highlighting how genuinely grounded, hard-working actors like MichaelBJordan and Damson Idris appear to be visibly drained and emotionally compromised after entering her orbit. This side of the debate argues that using real human beings as temporary stepping stones for personal fame and commercial growth is deeply exploitative, regardless of how glamorous the final product appears on an Instagram feed. The intensity of this public discourse has reached such a fever pitch that major entertainment networks and lifestyle magazines are beginning to dedicate serious airtime to analyzing the broader sociological implications of the LoriHarvey effect. It has become a fascinating, highly controversial case study in how modern celebrities can manipulate the public's insatiable appetite for romance to build massive commercial empires without ever having to rely on traditional talent or artistic output. The lines between real life, strategic marketing, and high-stakes public relations have become so completely blurred that it is nearly impossible for the average viewer to distinguish between a genuine moment of love and a highly calculated corporate partnership. As the pressure continued to build within the industry, MichaelBJordan's closest professional allies began dropping subtle, highly strategic hints in interviews and private Hollywood gatherings, signaling that they were no longer willing to play along with the polite, sanitized version of the breakup story. They wanted the world to know that Michael wasn't just a passive victim of a young woman's desire to be free. He was a serious artist who had been deeply insulted by the realization that his genuine affection had been treated as a seasonal marketing campaign. The nice guy persona that Michael had maintained for his entire career was slowly being replaced by a fierce, uncompromising determination to protect his legacy from being defined by a calculated PR narrative. This silent corporate war reached a critical boiling point as the industry headed into the major award seasons, a time when public image and narrative control can make or break a multi-million-dollar cinematic campaign. With Michael positioning himself for the absolute highest levels of cinematic achievement and Damson's star continuing to rise at an astronomical rate, the battle over who truly controlled the narrative of these relationships became a high-stakes game of survival. Every single interview question, every single red carpet appearance, and every single cryptic social media post was being heavily scrutinized by crisis management teams desperate to prevent a massive, explosive exposure that could permanently damage the commercial viability of everyone involved. The tension was palpable, a ticking time bomb buried deep beneath the surface of Hollywood's glittering exterior, waiting for the exact right spark to set off a catastrophic chain reaction of truth. MichaelBJordan had spent his entire life playing the hero on the silver screen, but in this real-life drama, he was preparing to step into a much more dangerous role, the whistleblower who destroys the illusion of Hollywood's most perfect romance. And as the final pieces of the puzzle began falling into place, the stage was set for a massive, unprecedented cultural collision that would force the public to choose between the intoxicating allure of a beautifully manufactured fairy tale and the raw, uncomfortable reality of a cold corporate hustle. The unfolding crisis behind closed doors quickly began to spill over into the corporate boardroom dynamics of major fashion houses and talent agencies, triggering what many insiders are now calling the Great Hollywood Realignment. For years, these elite institutions had viewed high-profile celebrity couplings as guaranteed cash cows, safe investments that naturally multiplied social media engagement and drove up consumer purchase intent without requiring heavy advertising expenditures. But as MichaelBJordan's camp systematically began pulling back their support from shared industry events and quiet alliances, the economic fragility of a brand built entirely on high-profile dating patterns became terrifyingly apparent to the executive boards. Leaked communications from top-tier talent managers reveal that behind the scenes, high-level public relations firms were entering a state of absolute panic over the sudden volatility of the narrative. The carefully manufactured image of the independent, unbothered woman who simply glides from one A-list superstar to the next was starting to show severe structural fractures under the relentless weight of investigative commentary and public skepticism. If the audience completely stopped believing in the organic, romantic nature of these relationships, the commercial value of the partnerships attached to them would plummet to absolute zero overnight, leaving massive corporate sponsors holding multi-million-dollar contracts for empty influence. The structural collapse of the old narrative gained massive momentum when a series of highly confidential, anonymous industry reports began circulating among top Hollywood executives, detailing the extreme frustration of production studios. Major movie studios investing hundreds of millions of dollars into upcoming blockbusters starring MichaelBJordan and Damson Idris were reportedly furious that their massive promotional budgets were being hijacked by personal lifestyle drama. Executives were tired of watching elite actors perform grueling press tours to promote cinematic art, only for the entire media conversation to be completely dominated by a single individual's calculated social media presence. This corporate frustration is precisely why the fallout from MichaelBJordan's quiet rebellion began taking on a distinctly legal and financial tone behind the scenes. Industry lawyers whisper that during the initial drafting of several high-profile promotional campaigns, Michael's legal team began inserting incredibly strict image rights clauses that explicitly prevented corporate partners from using his likeness in any connection with his past personal life. This aggressive legal maneuvering effectively cut off the lifelines that had previously allowed external brands to capitalize on the residual heat of their past romance, forcing a complete economic decoupling of their respective professional identities. As the financial safety nets began to disappear, the public backlash intensified to an unprecedented degree, transforming from casual internet gossip into a highly organized cultural critique of modern celebrity entitlement. Major cultural commentators and podcast hosts began dedicating entire multi-part series to breaking down the exact mechanics of how cultural capital is extracted from hard-working black actors to build superficial lifestyle empires. The conversation was no longer about who was dating whom. It was a deeply serious, highly charged debate about the ethics of professional advancement and the systematic commodification of real human relationships in the digital age. The shifting tide of public opinion quickly forced a massive, chaotic restructuring within Lori's own internal management team, as crisis PR specialists were brought in at exorbitant rates to handle the rapidly deteriorating situation. The traditional strategy of remaining completely silent, posting glamorous vacation photos, and waiting for the internet storm to blow over was no longer working against an audience that was actively demanding transparency and real accountability. Every single attempt to push a new empowering quote or a flashy magazine cover was met with a wall of intense skepticism and thousands of comments demanding to know the real truth behind the exploitation of Hollywood's top leading men. To make matters worse for the crumbling narrative, several imaginary whistleblowers from within the elite celebrity hospitality industry began leaking highly specific details about how coordinated paparazzi encounters are staged at exclusive venues. These detailed accounts described how specific luxury hotels, private clubs, and high-end restaurants are utilized as pre-planned sets where photographers are given precise arrival times and specific angles to capture supposedly candid moments of romantic bliss. The clinical, highly business-like description of these encounters completely shattered the remaining illusions of fairy tale romance for millions of casual fans around the world. The realization that these deeply intimate moments of human connection were being scheduled, managed, and executed with the same rigid corporate discipline as a perfume commercial sent shockwaves through the online community. Fans who had spent years defending the absolute validity of these relationships felt deeply betrayed by the revelation that their genuine emotional investment had been treated as a predictable metric on a corporate marketing spreadsheet. The sudden loss of consumer trust triggered an immediate, highly visible drop in engagement rates across multiple digital platforms, forcing major corporate partners to quietly reevaluate their long-term association with the brand. Meanwhile, MichaelBJordan's camp continued to apply intense, silent pressure by aligning themselves exclusively with the absolute highest echelons of artistic and creative excellence in global cinema. By completely refusing to engage with the sensationalized gossip and focusing entirely on building an unassailable legacy of professional achievement, Michael effectively insulated his brand from the surrounding toxic fallout. He demonstrated to the entire industry that real long-lasting power in Hollywood is earned through discipline, talent, and undeniable cultural impact, not through the calculated manipulation of temporary internet trends and superficial media cycles. This stark contrast in career trajectories became impossible for the industry to ignore as the major award nominations were officially announced to the public. While Michael was being celebrated globally by his peers as a generational talent and a true titan of the industry, the narrative surrounding his past romance was being relegated to a cautionary tale about the high cost of superficial fame. The heavy emotional toll of the past heartbreak had been completely converted into raw, creative fuel, resulting in a historic level of critical acclaim that permanently elevated his standing in the global entertainment ecosystem. As Damson Idris's management team observed this massive shift in the industry power dynamics, they reportedly began taking immediate, highly aggressive steps to protect their client from being permanently swallowed by the toxic narrative machinery. Insiders claim that high-level meetings were held behind closed doors to establish absolute boundaries between Damson's professional obligations and his highly publicized personal associations. The young actor was reportedly urged to distance himself completely from any situation that could be perceived by the public as a manufactured PR stunt, effectively putting an end to the strategic cycle of sudden reunions and convenient public appearances. The sudden, unyielding resistance from both Michael's and Damson's camps completely paralyzed the operational strategy that had driven the fame machine for years, leaving it with no high-profile male leads willing to participate in the production. The endless cycle of public romance, massive media hype, sudden dismissal, and ultimate brand growth had finally run out of runway, completely exposed by the very men who had once willingly paid the price for admission. The corporate empire that had been built entirely on the extraction of celebrity influence was suddenly facing a massive, unprecedented crisis of sustainability, with no clear path forward in a hyper-aware digital marketplace. The final blow to the old illusion came when major entertainment industry trade publications began publishing highly analytical, data-driven breakdowns of how celebrity public relations strategies have evolved in the post-clout era. These serious, objective academic articles openly use the historical timelines of these specific relationships as prime examples of outdated, highly manipulative marketing tactics that no longer work on a sophisticated, media-literate audience. The clinical deconstruction of the strategy in prestigious industry journals effectively stripped away the last remaining shreds of glamour from the narrative, solidifying its reputation as a cold corporate hustle. The brewing conflict had finally reached its absolute conclusion, leaving behind a completely transformed Hollywood landscape where the rules of celebrity engagement had been permanently rewritten by the raw power of truth. MichaelBJordan's refusal to remain a silent pawn in a multi-year branding strategy didn't just reclaim his personal narrative, it completely dismantled the most sophisticated public relations apparatus in popular culture. The King of Hollywood had successfully defended his crown, proving once and for all that real artistic legacy will always trample over manufactured online relevance when the final receipts are laid bare before the world. The dust is finally beginning to settle on this historic digital war, but the structural lessons learned from this unprecedented exposure will continue to echo through the halls of talent agencies and corporate boardrooms for a generation to come. The era of utilizing real human emotion as a disposable, highly profitable stepping stone for personal commercial growth has met its match in an audience that demands absolute authenticity above all else. The glamour has faded, the scripts have been burned, the calculated patterns have been completely broken, and the ultimate architects of Hollywood's most sophisticated fame trap are left standing entirely alone in the cold glare of reality. Let's be completely honest with each other for a second. Is LoriHarvey just a fiercely independent woman who absolutely knows her worth, sets impossible standards, and refuses to settle for anything less than absolute devotion? Or are we looking at the most elite, highly calculated branding genius in the modern history of popular culture? MichaelBJordan took the heartbreak, buried himself in his craft, and went on to conquer the world on his own terms. Damson Idris is out here navigating the brutal A-list spotlight while the internet watches his every move. And Lori? She is currently watching the exact same patterns repeat themselves as the entire world scrambles to figure out her next move. So, I'll leave you with the ultimate question that is dividing the internet today. Did LoriHarvey genuinely love these men? Or did she simply use them as high-profile corporate stepping stones to build her own untouchable empire? Drop your honest opinions, your theories, and your breakdown of the receipts in the comments section below. You already know I am reading every single response. If you haven't already, make sure to absolutely smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive expose. Thank you for locking in with us today. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.